General I. D. White, Division Commander, and formerly commanding the 82nd Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, 67th Armored Regiment, and Combat Command B.
Once again, I am disappointed that I could not accept the very kind and gracious invitation of your President, Milton Fire, to be the guest of honor at the 7th Annual Reunion. It is hard to realize that it was 25 years ago when our division was organized, or to realize all that has occurred in the 20 years since, when we found ourselves across the Elbe and ready and able to smash into Berlin.
In the Sicilian campaign, I was commander of CCB and the so-called Floating Reserve, which included the 18th Infantry of the 1st Infantry Division, as well as elements of the 2nd Armored. General Gaffey commanded the division at that time. He was a fine soldier and leader, and his untimely death in an airplane accident at Fort Knox shortly after the war was a great loss to the Army. Going ashore that afternoon with a small CCB headquarters group to locate a CP and staging area, we were nearly alongside a 1st Division LST when it was bombed by German aircraft and blew up practically in our faces. I am sure you all recall the German tank attack on our beachhead at Jala and the great work of Briard Johnson and 4 tanks from I Company, 67th Armored Regiment, commanded by First Lieutenant James A. White. I had left our very informal and advanced CP just before the attack started to return to the beach to see if we couldn't speed up the unloading of more tanks. Just before I reached the beach, shells from the German tank guns began to fall in the area. On the beach, I found a battalion exec from the 67th Armored with a few tanks. I told him to get up on the hill and start shooting. He said, "What's the plan?" I don't recall what I said at the time, but he told me later that it went something like this. "Plan, hell, this may be Custer's last stand."
While considering the nature of my remarks to this gathering, I went through my files of matters pertaining to the 2nd Armored Division and came across an order of the day that I had written and published to the division almost exactly 20 years ago today. It recalled vividly to my mind the events of those days. As I read it, I realized how inadequate was my attempt to express the praise for the achievement that you, who made the division what it was, so richly deserved. In the sincere hope that it may be of interest to you, I would like to read this order of the day, and in its simple soldier language, you may briefly recapture the great thrill of accomplishment which it tries to record. Headquarters, 2nd Armored Division, Office of the Division Commander, APO 252. Order of the day. Since the division crossed the Rhine on 28 March and launched its offensive through the 17th Airborne Division and across the Dortmund-Ems Canal on March 30th last, it has driven a total of 190 airline miles in 13 days to reach and cross the Elbe River. This represents an average advance of approximately 15 miles per day, with the greatest single advance being 57 miles on the 11th of April. This in itself is a remarkable feat of arms. The division snapped shut the steel ring around the Ruhr through its meeting with the 3rd Armored Division at Lippstadt, thus sealing the fate of Germany's most vital industrial area and the hundreds of thousands of troops therein. It has spearheaded the 9th Army drive throughout, and by the speed and vigor of its advance, undoubtedly brought the end of the war considerably nearer. Every officer and enlisted man of the division may take justifiable pride in this accomplishment. It was your skill, courage, endurance, and loyalty which made it possible. A factual listing of statistics gives an idea of the tremendous effect this drive has already had, and the future effect the loss of both materiel and productive capacity caused by it must have on the course of the war. These figures are necessarily incomplete, due to the impossibility of listing the enormous amount of material overrun, captured, or destroyed, and are far below the actual totals. Total area overrun, 3,000 square miles. Prisoners captured, 45,022. Officials of Nazi Party and secret agencies captured, 80. Tanks, 48. Guns, 255. Vehicles, 579. Railroad trains, 18. Airplanes, 265. Airports, 5. Hospitals, 205. In addition to the above, tremendous stocks of supplies and munitions were captured or destroyed. Innumerable large factories were overrun. Many of these were underground, one of which was producing a new type of jet plane never before used operationally. Countless numbers of Allied prisoners of war and forced laborers were liberated. Today, exactly 2 years and 6 months since the division first set sail from the United States for the invasion of Africa, the city of Magdeburg was captured. In this task, the division, in conjunction with the 30th Infantry Division, nullified all enemy resistance in less than 36 hours and captured approximately 2,500 prisoners in addition to large stores of equipment. We are now across the Elbe. No defensive positions behind which the enemy could reform to halt the Allied advance remain. For him, the war is finally and irrevocably lost, and our victory has been made possible by your blood and sweat. No unit has written a brighter chapter in the history of this war. It remains only to add the final page to that chapter. I know you will make it as brilliant as the rest, a fitting climax to 2.5 long years of campaign. Signed, I.D. White, Major General, U.S. Army, Commanding. So now I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you and for listening to my remarks. As I said before, I hope that by reading this order of the day, it may recall to your minds as vividly as it did to mine the great thrill of accomplishment which we all felt at that time. May God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Lieutenant General Edward H. Brooks, Division Commander.
Personally, I am delighted to have the opportunity of using this means to speak to you tonight and recall some of the unforgettable events that occurred when we served our country together in the 2nd Armored Division. Old Hell on Wheels was an efficient outfit, disciplined and professional. We kept hidden by thorough camouflage, as you may remember, until we were needed. Our first taste of fighting was in the Bocage country, and General Collier was in this. It came about the middle of June over around Carrington, when, to reinforce the 101st Airborne Division, CCA, under that gallant soldier Maurice Rose, ably abetted by Colonel Collier, swung into action and hit the 6th Parachute and the 37th Panzer Grenadier Regiments head-on. They only took 6 prisoners, but they left an estimated 800 dead on the battlefield. This action was a vital one. Vital because its success assured the linking up of the 2 landings that we had made, the one on Omaha Beach and the one on Utah Beach. How many of you fellows remember the 4th of July celebration we pulled that year? How at high noon we cut loose with everything we had and fired the national salute of 48 guns, heaving the junk over in Jerry's lap. Even our British cousins got a kick out of that one. Later that month came the breakthrough near San Lo. With a powerhouse play, one combat commands one behind the other, CCA swung through to Tessie Severe to block crossings downstream. CCB under I.D. White was to head for Braille on the coast and bottle up the Krauts in the peninsula. The Division Reserve under Sid Hines, plowing straight ahead, was to capture a critical road junction at the confluence of 5 roads, and with a typical 2nd Armored Division order, was to be prepared to attack in any direction. At about this time, the tempo increased as the rout of the Germans began. There was Saint-Denis-le-Gast, where during the night the 78th Armored and the 62nd Field Artillery Battalions fired point blank at some 2,500 Germans of a Panzer group who were trying to break out of the ring that we had thrown around them. This firefight during the night practically destroyed the entire force. There was Barrington early in August, with 4 or 5 days and nights of bitter fighting, holding that high ground north of the town against the mass retreat of the routed German 7th Army. There was Domfront, where the 82nd Reconnaissance Battalion under Colonel Merriam destroyed a force of some 400 Germans, much of it by street fighting. Then came the beginning of the swing to the northeast to cut off German troops trying to escape from the Falaise pocket. The capture of Elbeuf on the Seine after a stiff battle, where I later learned that the German commanders Field Marshal Model and Panzer General Dietrich had committed the remnants of 8 divisions to stop us. The fighting was rugged that day, but we had the situation pretty well in hand by late afternoon, around 4:30 or so. And when it was reported to me that evening at 6 o'clock, BBC had announced that British troops had entered Elbeuf and crossed the Seine at that point without opposition, I thought that after the rather rugged work we'd had earlier in the day that we should at least keep the record straight. And General Collier will remember this one, because he obtained a receipt for the city before turning it over to the Canadian troops. So today, somewhere in the archives of the United States, there should be a receipt for a town in France given by the Canadian troops of the British Army to the 2nd Armored Division of the American Army. The sweep continued on. One cold and rainy night, about 2300, as I sat in my van with the Chief of Staff, then Colonel, now General Palmer, discussing matters for the morrow, a knock came at the door. 2 rather tired-looking officers from Corps headquarters came in. When asked what brought them there at that hour of the night, they replied, "An impossible order for the 2nd Armored Division." I said, "What is this impossible order, gentlemen?" The reply came, "Sir, the Corps Commander presents his compliments and wants you to know that the 2nd Armored Division must be in Ghent in 48 hours. I replied, "You present my compliments to the Corps Commander and tell him to have no fears, that the 2nd Armored Division will be in Ghent in 48 hours. And you look a little bit wet and tired, so on your way out, stop by the kitchen and get yourselves a cup of coffee." As the door closed, I turned to Colonel Palmer and said, "Charlie, where in hell's Ghent?" Well, we finally found Ghent, but it wasn't on our operational maps. It was over in the British zone, and it was some 120 miles away inside German lines. Orders were immediately issued. Bypass all opposition. Do not give the enemy the satisfaction of a fight, but get on your objective. Remember the speed of movement the first day? Old Hell on Wheels surely rolled them that day. And early on the morning of the second day, I think it was around 8:30, we were on our objective in the vicinity of Tournai, hours ahead of the deadline. And in so doing, you men of the 2nd Armored Division became the first troops to enter Belgium in World War II, an achievement for which the 2nd Armored Division wears the Belgian fourragère. Yes, you can wear the fourragère, and you can move around with your heads held high, for you, my friends, have served your country in uniform on the field of battle in one of the greatest combat divisions of all time, the 2nd Armored. It's a high honor and a priceless privilege. Thank you for listening, And Godspeed to each one of you and to your loved ones in the days that lie ahead.